Monster Hunter World is about learning the intricacies of your favorite weapon, learning the particular behaviors of the gigantic and wondrous beasts you're tasked with taking down, and learning about the sprawling world it all takes place in. There's a lot to take in, but rather than assault you all at once, Monster Hunter World implements a considered approach. The game slowly ramps up in complexity while making sure you have more than enough to keep you occupied. Yet despite that never-ending push toward further progress, Monster Hunter World wraps its upward climb for better gear in a delightfully charismatic outer layer. The consistent jovial vibe creates an adventurous and motivating atmosphere where it feels thrilling to hunt, even dozens of hours in.
The rest of the 5th are already here. You're the last to arrive.
Nothing is more emphasized than the various locales where most everything takes place, and it soon becomes clear why. The first of these areas is the Ancient Forest, a lush and layered environment where you leap across chasms on hanging vines and ascend to the top of a peak while carefully avoiding or fiercely engaging creatures of all shapes and sizes along the way. It's far easier to appreciate such surroundings because of how well World keeps things moving along. Mining ore, for instance, no longer requires breakable pickaxes in your inventory. You can mine freely for however many nodes of ore are found out in the wild. Even better, you can track just about anything after uncovering it. Honey for a mega potion or an herb for an antidote can be easily identified on the map. Then, all that's required is putting a pin on it from within the map and following the glowing trail that appears. Getting together with friends is also flexible, whether that's done before the mission or by firing an SOS flare in the thick of a fight if you need more aid than previously thought. These are just a few minor examples of how World aggressively streamlines almost every aspect of the traditional Monster Hunter flow. Initially, it's easy to fear that such an aggressive approach would make the game too procedural, as if in an effort to welcome new players, Monster Hunter would become almost allergic to its own complexities, eliminating much of the mystery that can make the series so enthralling in the first place. In reality, it's exactly the opposite. There's an abundance of things to discover, yet practically all of those things are immediately exciting, rather than simply a step in a much more convoluted process that eventually has a significant payoff. The design of Monster Hunter World is so carefully thought out and so efficient at pulling you in that there's no barrier of entry for enjoying it. Whether you've been hunting since the series began and can identify every single change, or jumping in for the first time, both sides will be able to enjoy a game that feels as though it has the differing audiences in mind, without ever catering too hard to either one.
We're ready to roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty.
Such a philosophy is easily identified with the game's structure and how it chooses to break itself up into different components of varying sizes. The main story is handled entirely through assigned quests, big mandatory objectives you must get through in order to solve the mystery of the largely unresearched new world you find yourself in. Optional quests tend to offer very useful benefits, such as adding new ingredients to the canteen where you can eat before venturing forth, receiving buffs, and potentially even temporary skills. Bounties are either small tasks like gathering a certain number of items, or larger ones like slaying a type of monster a number of times. What's great about so many bounties is they happen almost incidentally. You chip away at them while focusing on something much bigger, since progress carries over between other things you're already doing. Previously, such tasks would have taken up their own quests, and while there is still the occasional optional gathering quests, the bulk of it has been integrated in a far smoother and less tedious way. Finally, investigations offer slight twists on standard hunts. The trade-off is a greater number of rewards, perfect if there's a new set of armor or weapon you've got your eye on.
Magnifique.
It may all sound like a lot, but when taken together, these elements create a crucial amount of flexibility. If you're dead set on moving the story forward, it's always obvious what you need to do next. Rushing ahead means you certainly won't be as powerful as you could be at any given moment, but nothing is stopping you from trying. Power is determined by gear, earned by slaying monsters and harvesting materials from the world. Often the biggest limiting factor is your own capabilities. So if you're intimidated by a new monster, you can clear up investigations or optional quests, bulking up the strength of your arsenal and fostering a growing familiarity with whichever of the 14 available weapons you happen to be taking for a spin. Or if you don't like hunting at all, there's incredible incentive to just get out into the world and explore. Along the way, you may gather invaluable ingredients needed to craft items, clear off a few bounties, or even make some adorable allies who are often cleverly hidden in the most remote areas of the map. Whatever you choose to do and whatever way you choose to do it, Monster Hunter World ensures that there's always a strong sense of forward momentum. You'll want to poke at all the different aspects, not necessarily because it feels required, but rather because many of them are so worthwhile to do.
Well, you were right. There's our mark.
Despite how effective the game is at making its progression flexible and interesting, it is essentially still a march forward, chasing after better gear and greater challenges. Yet it rarely feels cold or mechanical. There's so much warmth packed into even the smallest aspects. Take, for example, the aforementioned canteen. Run by a macho head cat chef and by an unerringly eager supporting crew, they take so much pride and delight in preparing your food during a brief cutscene that it's hard not to anticipate chowing down. The same lighthearted and lively attitude can be found everywhere in Monster Hunter World. Even the smallest task usually has some flair of personality to it, making it easy to relax, sink in, and enjoy the world. It also serves as a welcome reprieve to the often harrowing hunts. Your headquarters, much like everything else, expands and grows, eventually offering a wide array of services. Watching the base reflect your own accomplishments is in many ways just as rewarding as getting a new tier of gear. When it comes to presentation, though, it's hard to top the monsters themselves. As a whole, the set of creatures is relentlessly creative, and it's just as enjoyable to watch them move around as it is taking them down. The Great Jagras seems to be a fairly typical, albeit large lizard-like creature, until he starts gobbling up other poor things, ballooning to a comically impressive size. Similarly, the flying Paolumu sucks in the air around him to turn his head into a giant white puff. It's both adorable and a little mesmerizing as it ripples through the air. More importantly, though, these things are exhilarating to fight because of how well balanced they are. Nearly all of the monsters have some sort of variation of similar basic moves, like tail and claw swipes. They also have things that are entirely unique to them, such as the Ziziyaku, with bright fins that regularly emit a blinding light that leaves unsuspecting hunters vulnerable. Each of the monster's gimmicks gets more elaborate over time, appropriately expanding along with your own skills. Conquering a monster means identifying and taking advantage of its distinct rhythm, so you'll have to constantly adapt, preventing the hunting from ever truly feeling rote. Specifically with World, there's a greater amount of chaos and improvisation that just wasn't a part of the old games in the same way. Out of nowhere, other monsters might invade your hunt, forcing you to deal with 2 or 3 threats instead of just one. It can be a liability or an asset depending on how it's dealt with, and effectively spices up hunts that you may have already done several times because it's hard to predict how and when it's going to happen. The same can be true of the environment. Effectively using terrain can make seemingly insurmountable battles far more manageable. Finding vantage points to leap off of, creating poisonous puddles, and dramatic interactions like causing a flood all help swing things in your favor. None of these are forced in your face either, merely serving as options for those brave enough to experiment in the heat of the moment. Getting a crazy idea, trying it out, and then having it work is easily among the most gratifying moments in the game, and really goes a long way in making you feel like a clever hunter as opposed to some other generic action game hero. It's so disappointing then that the monster essential to the story, Zora Magdaros, is fought in the most dreadfully dull way. You're either on the back of the skyscraper-sized titan, mindlessly hacking away at marked weak points, or blasting with a cannon or ballista from a distance. For as much build-up as there is for Zora Magdaros, and there really is a lot, it's odd that the actual confrontation feels like it could come from any other game, especially when the remaining fights are all so distinct. Zora Magdaros doesn't require any of the skill or knowledge that you've built up to that point. When the game offers the chance to go through the fight again to grind for specific gear, it's hard summoning any motivation to do so.
The latest monster to make the Elder Crossing is known as Zora Magdaros, a huge monster with a mountain of fire upon its back.
The story as a whole is rather flat and underwhelming. Despite offering decent context for why you're hunting, the rest is vague and cobbled together. One big threat is introduced only to eventually be supplanted by another with little transition in between, making it hard to get attached to any of them. The same is true of the characters, who pop up and then are practically discarded immediately afterward, only ever hinting at a broader history or greater level of depth. There's just no single element of the story that feels as impactful as the game tries to make it. Monster Hunter has never been about the story, and considering how well crafted the fights and environments are, you could argue that it doesn't need it, but World puts a surprising amount of effort in here, more so than others before it, and because of that effort, it's hard shaking the feeling that they could have done a lot more with what they had.
Everyone else, you know the drill. Make sure these hunters have everything they need.
Now we're talking!
What is tough to fault is the weapons. Every single one is as equally viable as another, and there are sensible trade-offs. The Charge Blade is probably the most mechanically dense, but going through the effort of learning it rewards you with a powerful weapon capable of blasting forth absurd amounts of damage. Yet other weapons are far more intuitive out of the gate, such as the sword and shield, which offers solid offense, defense, and mobility, feeling comfortable and versatile immediately. Even the most seemingly basic weapons have subtle tricks to them or can be wielded in non-obvious ways. There's enough diversity that it's hard to imagine something not clicking, especially since you're given access to all weapons right away. Plus, if one isn't working in the moment, it's very easy to switch to something else, even mid-mission, if you think it'll increase your chances. There are honestly few games that strike such a fine balance between accessibility, depth, and spectacle with their weapons. It's very easy to imagine Monster Hunter World looking intimidating from outside, considering the reputation the series has built amongst some for being obtuse or cumbersome. World does not share the bulk of those issues, feeling as though it's far more interested in shaping itself around you than you around it. There are so many moments of triumph, so many things to explore, and so many new creatures to see, that it's fun letting it all surround you and simply settling in. The game lends enough of a guiding hand to get you in on that fun and excitement, but never oversteps its bounds, creating something remarkable that really anyone can be a part of. Easy Allies reviews are made possible by generous viewers just like you. If you like what you see, check out patreon.com/easyallies to see our other videos. And consider becoming a patron to help us make more.